Hello, good morning, and welcome to the second day of the Data for Development Conference. My name is Rob. I'm very happy to welcome you all back here. Just as a quick reminder, we're doing this conference at the same time that there's a big online hackathon happening where we have over 200 teams hacking away and competing for the best top teams of the hackathon. And while they're doing that, we're doing a series of panel discussions on topics that are important for the teams and the teams that are hacking away and building their prototypes. So yesterday we had a series of panel discussions on the topic of foundation, setting the groundwork for the development that is needed. And today we have three panel discussions. The first one is going to be now, and the three panel discussions are about lifting. So development is the overall theme for today. Today we're going to start with job security. So job security is of a paramount importance when we talk about Africa, and I'm very, very happy to welcome to the panel four distinguished guests that are going to have for the next hour a fruitful discussion, hopefully a lively discussion on the topic of job security. We know that Africa is a very young continent. We know that Africa is a continent that is filled with opportunities for young people, and that's what we're going to talk about, how to find job security for all of them. So without any further ado, let me introduce you the panelists, and I'll ask them to say a few words about themselves and their background and relevance to the topic. So let's start from the right. Pumla Maswanganyi from the Roddenberry Foundation. I see you have a very nice background. You're making us all jealous, at least here in Tallinn, where it's snowy and cold. So you can see the theme here is a little bit more Christmas. There, I think the theme is a little bit different. So tell us about your background and where are you at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Johannesburg North. I am from the Maswanganyi. I'm a systems designer with a studio art development and management background. I'm focused on designing systems for multiple frameworks from businesses to NGOs and everything in between, with a primary focus of building solutions for marginalized and previously disadvantaged groups, which includes youth and women. So my work ranges from ed tech to health and consumer experiences, which is currently what I'm working on. And yeah, that's that on me. Really excited to be here and discuss the issue.
Super. Thank you so much, Pumla, for joining us. Then we have Nelson Ajulo from Zarttech. Nelson, where are you joining us at the moment from? Hang on, Nelson, you're on mute. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hi everyone. I'm calling from the Netherlands, but myself, I am Nigerian, and I've gotten the opportunity to live in the West and also live as well in Africa as well. I'm very passionate for Africa and helping Africa meet up and catch up, because I really think that we've got a lot of resources. Personally, my main principles, I think, evolves around equal worth of people and efficiency, how we can leverage the current asset that we have and have enough resources to share among everyone. So I'm really excited to be here this morning and just looking forward to see how the conversation goes and what amazing beauty we can all come up together in this kind of conversation and deliberation.
Thank you, Nelson, for joining us. Then we have Damali Ssali, who is from the Ideation Corner, and I believe you're joining us from Uganda?
Yes, I am. So yes, my name is Damali Ssali. I am the founder of the Ideation Corner, and I'm joining you from Kampala, Uganda. The Ideation Corner is a social impact fund that is looking to help young, innovative entrepreneurs, especially women, to scale up their businesses. So after they prove the concept, how can they scale them up? So that's what I am working on. At the same time, I'm also the Ugandan ambassador for women entrepreneurs. So I'm looking at entrepreneurship, job creation, and also innovation. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much for joining us. And finally, we have Dr. Patrice Habinshuti from the Envisage Incubators. And Patrice, where are you joining us from today?
Thank you so much. I'm Patrice Habinshuti, and I'm joining you from Kigali, Rwanda. As you said, I'm from Envisage Incubators. I am currently the co-founder, but I'm also in charge of operations for our Africa activities. Envisage Incubators is, as you understand it, it's actually a startup incubator that is focusing more on creating a model that can work for like incubation projects. So we have our own incubators, but we also give our model to other organizations who are running startup incubators around Rwanda and Africa. Thank you.
All right. So now that we have our panelists, let's get to it. So as I already mentioned, job security is one of the most important topics that we're discussing here at this conference. The reason for that is that Africa being such a young continent, you have a lot of young people filled with potential, filled with energy, filled with know-how that want to make sure that they see a future for themselves in Africa. And so we know that the unemployment rates are quite high. We know that the youth are finding hard to find the prospects of their job. And just judging by the panelists we have here, there's potentially different solutions for this. I think we have a lot of people in the panel here who are focused on making sure that this youth is creating their own jobs, right? So entrepreneurship as a vehicle towards making sure that they are, doing something meaningful with their lives. But there's other paths to solving this problem, and that's what I want to kind of discuss with you guys today. So, Pumla, maybe let's start with you. If you look at the young people coming out of university today, and you look at what they consider to be the next steps, what are people, South Africa perhaps a little bit different from the rest of the continent, but what are the prospects? What sectors do they turn to? Are they all thinking of going abroad? Are they all thinking of starting their own companies? What's the usual path, if there is such a thing, for the youth of Africa?
Yeah, the usual path is no more, right? I think in the future of work, because there is no future of work without the future of education. So I'll start by saying, sorry, I think my internet is a little unstable here. But the OECD recently published a report on youth aspirations, and it indicates that there's a large gap between where youth would like to see themselves job-wise and the kinds of jobs available to them right now. So what was interesting is that stability, obviously, and job youth associated that with being in the public sector, whereas most jobs are actually in the agricultural sector, and so that leaves an interest and aspiration gap, as opposed to what they can actually reach. So what was also seen is that self-employment is chosen out of need and so much. So I think when we look at the landscape, the interesting reflection from my side is that there is a to be done, and that we can reshape to meet this youth where they are, the prospects, because a lot of education does not actually position them well to even enter the public sector. There was a huge skills gap with that as well. So yeah. I would say in terms of prospects, obviously things like entrepreneurship. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And yesterday we had a panel on education, which touched upon exactly this sort of skills and maybe the mismatch or the skill gap between what is being taught in universities and what the job market, or what some of these self-creating of jobs, the skills for that, maybe that's missing. And what was interesting from the panel yesterday is that we were talking about the food security panel, where we said that I think it was 85% of some of the employment opportunities still come from the agriculture sector. So I think that is a very important point to touch upon when we talk about the opportunities for the youth, because we tend to look at it very much from a tech perspective, right? We tend to talk about it very much from,
Exactly.
everyone's going to be in tech, the digitization of work and the skills needed for that. And I think there's a big gap. Nelson, you work, if I remember correctly, you work on this sort of initiatives to do remote work between people working in Africa and some opportunities in Europe. Is that right? So do you see that as a response? Do you see that as an opportunity for the job security issues that are affecting Africa?
Thanks a lot. Definitely, it is a true solution, especially one that is fair in equal partnership to both sides. As you mentioned, the current alternative right now in Africa is people migrating away from Africa, which also leads to brain drain. And of course, as we see the huge population increment, and which is going to constantly increase, and if the economy value or the economy progression doesn't increase in corresponding to the population size, so more people will be in extreme hardship still. Even though poverty is going down, still quite a tangible number of people are still in that extreme hardship. And if the West, which is very good in branding and good in speaking, or good in branding and position itself in such a very nice place to be. Of course, people would migrate away from Africa, leading to brain drain in Africa. But there's still a possibility of equal partnership between the West and Africa, and also with existing infrastructure. I think like the infrastructure to facilitate such kind of work, such as remote work, is available in Africa, just that it is expensive and needs some upfront investment. And because of the low trust economy that we have currently present in Africa, it is very hard to get those kind of upfront financing to be able to finance those infrastructure. And that's why we provide those infrastructure. We provide the upfront financing to our developers so they can have access to the best kind of internet, stable electricity, and then laptop. And then with this, they can work remotely from Africa, the same way we work right now in the West, and we have stable electricity. It's also the same way as well. You can also have a virtual background behind you, and it's going to be as good as you working from home remotely, also in the West as well. So it is a perfect solution indeed, which is actually equal partnership, good for both sides.
And Nelson, I'm assuming that during the pandemic and the rise of remote work, we probably saw an increase in this type of partnership, as you say it, right? More people in Africa that are taking opportunity of working remotely, and then you start thinking, if I'm working remotely, here, I could get a job at a company in Europe, and perhaps even, and I don't know how much this happens, maybe you have some figures. Does this sort of remote work opportunity open doors to, working from, let's say, Kampala to a company that's headquartered in Johannesburg?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen the huge change. It's not even between Africa and Europe, also within Europe as well. Companies are first to start hybrid remote model, whereby you go to the office 1 day a week. Most of our employee does that as well. And even Dutch people in the Netherlands leave Netherlands because it's so cold, and they move to like Sri Lanka or like Johannesburg, warm temperature place, and then they work remotely from there, and it's becoming the norm, the new norm. So that's actually open way, and people's mind are also shifting as well. And I also think the increasing scarcity in the West because of the huge increment of digitalization need is also because people, even if they don't want to accept it, after they can find people, the right kind of talent to help them develop within 6, 7, 8 months, then they start, then they're hoping to look at Africa. And Africa is actually the perfect solution to Europe, especially being on the same line of equator, same time zone, English, proximity of culture.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely one of the paths that can be very helpful in terms of creating job security. But I want to bring Patrice and Damali to the discussion, because I think they might have a slightly different opinion here, because I think they're very much focused on creating entrepreneurship skills whereby people create their own jobs, right? And I don't know, guys, what do you think? If most people are then not brain drained, because they're still in Africa. But if they're working for companies abroad, does that remove some of the some of the need to create your own job? Do they then become cozy and not lazy, but it removes some of the need to create your own jobs? How do you see this? What's the right approach here? Maybe Damali, let's start with you.
Thank you. I feel like there's a big gap. The gap is wide between the people who are employable and the jobs that are available. So whatever opportunities that there are, I don't see them as being, a chance to somehow make the Africans or the Ugandans, for example, lazy. It just gives an extra opportunity for them. So if they are able to, in fact, work for European companies for, say, customer care, customer service, and if they're Anglophone country, of course, it depends, because Africa is both Anglophone and Francophone. So the Ugandans are supposed to work for the Anglophone Europe, and then the French-speaking countries in Africa will speak for the Francophone. So I see it as there's such a wide gap, so it's not much of a problem. So, for example, in Uganda, only 4 out of the 10 employable people, Ugandans, actually have jobs. So you have six people who can be employed, but they don't have jobs for themselves. And this number just grows every year because 75% of our population is below, number just increases. So the gap is just incredibly wide. That's why I at the Ideation Corner, I'm looking at with the young people have to create their own jobs, but they also need to be facilitated and incentivized to ensure that the jobs they create are sustainable, or that they stay in them, and they can also employ other young people. Because of course, the innovative entrepreneurial people statistically in a population are fewer. There may be 15% of the population is innovative and entrepreneurial, but that 15% can employ the rest. So we need to facilitate and make sure that the entrepreneur can be scaled up. And that's why, in fact, I'm focusing on that. But speaking of jobs, I see, at least during the lockdown, which one of the major sectors that blew up was the creative economy. So, and studies have shown that Africa is only creating about is only contributing to about just 1% of the global creative economy, which global creative economy is $2.2 trillion. So Africa is only contributing 2.2 billion. But my maybe the silver lining for me during the corona pandemic over the last 2 years is that it has created such a big demand for people who are in the creative economy. And it's because now companies need more creative advertising. They need better flyers. They need to communicate more online because people were stuck at home. And also because people were stuck at home, people started consuming or buying and selling stuff online because they were stuck at home. So it opened up a huge economy in terms of online access, online acceptance of, technologies, and we have to use it. So because of that, now a lot of companies are looking for graphic designers who are, really, really creative. They're looking for advertising, campaigns, or people who do advertising campaigns that are really creative. The people who are, for example, people who do home designs, they also saw an increase in demand for their work. Because people were stuck at home, then they started thinking, you know what, I need to actually redesign my garden. It looks terrible. Yeah. So, and that economy has no limitations. You do not require a degree. You don't require money. You just need your creative brain. So there are very low barriers to entry, and that economy is growing incredibly. And I see that as an economy that say governments or people can actually facilitate, because it's a great economy to allow people who are creative to get into because of the lower barriers to entry. I was speaking to a young person who created this platform where he connects people who have jobs, short-term jobs, to people who need a short-term job. So you may be an HR lady who's just had a baby and then you left your job, but you have your brain and you still have those skills. And then there's this company that needs to review your HR policies. So this company is called Flip Africa, and it connects such people where you just need they just need someone for 3 months, and I am available for 3 months, and I can still work from my home as I look after my baby. So those kinds of jobs have apparently, based on this interview, have apparently opened up a lot, especially during the corona pandemic, because people have opened their minds up to the fact that I actually don't need a full-time HR person. Of course, some people have lost their jobs, but it's also created a lot more jobs, short-term jobs. And that availability of more short-term jobs also, I think, gives us the training to say now, think about providing more services even to Europe. because now people learn to work from home, they learn to manage themselves. So they learn to expand their horizons. And
I think it goes back to what Pumla was mentioning, where the usual path, the traditional path, is no longer the path. There's no longer this traditional path. So a lot of these new opportunities open up, and you see different types of engagement, different types of length of engagement, different types of opportunities being created. You touched upon the creative sector, and that's something definitely that I want to explore with the panel. But before that, I still want to hear what Patrice has to say about this sort of approach between making your own job versus working remotely for a European company.
Thank you so much. I would say that the big or huge problem of unemployment for African youth cannot be solved by let's say like hunting employment opportunities alone, because African youth, the statistics show that it's really increasing each year, and the people who are really being out of our universities are so many. So if you look at the number of jobs to be that have to be created, and those that are created, actually there is a huge gap. If you look at let's say 10 to 12 million entering the workforce every year, and these 3 million people who are actually being able to get jobs, there is that huge gap. It comes to what Damali was saying, like out of 10 people, only 4 people can get employment. So how do we approach that? It's a huge challenge, but we have to solve that and have an African solution to that challenge. And by saying African solution, as ourselves as collectively, governments, development partners, everyone, and even youth themselves, we have to think what we are going to do to solve this problem long term. So this is entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship gets us to create jobs for ourselves and for our communities and for everyone, versus the situation where I get a job with a European company, it's 3 months, and then after 3 months, I'm going to be jobless and have not created an impact in my community. Mm-hmm. So entrepreneurship is the way to go. But how and where do we find or do we land sustainably as young people? As you said, most of the people, young people, are not really attracted to agriculture. And in Africa, agriculture is really the sector that provides 85% of the employment. And when we look at young people, even those who graduate, they don't want to do agriculture. So how are we making agriculture attractive to young people? Or how are we really making it like a field or a sector that has opportunities for young people? So this comes to thinking or rethinking on how, like, what young people love can be attached to agriculture. So if it is tech, for example, you see young people are like, tech is a booming sector where every young person wants to actually get involved in. They want to create their company, which is like has a tech aspect. It's also a sector that needs a smaller investment because we have also to be mindful that young people don't have like huge seed funding or money to start their businesses. So, but there is a way we can link that, because agriculture is a sector that like many Africans are in, and that is really considerable even when we look at the economy. For example, in Rwanda, agriculture provides like 70% of all the employment and 33% of the GDP. 1/3 of like the economy is from that sector. So if we look at that, young people, in our statistics, we had like the average age of a farmer being 55 years. Wow. So you see, there is a huge gap. Then we have to actually attract young people to get into the agriculture sector. So then how do we now define agriculture to young people.
Yeah, but Patrice, I
We
think
can
that
tell them that there is also ICT for agriculture.
exactly,
Yes.
and I think if we just look at the numbers, just judging from a very small snapshot of the participants that we have at this event and the ideas that were submitted and the teams that are working at this event, the topic of food security was one of the biggest ones in terms of participation. And you're talking clearly of a youth sector, entrepreneurial sector that comes to this event, and the two biggest topics were education and food security. So I think that already shows a propensity for them, or at least an interest in these two topics, right? So they do want to change the way that education works. They do see opportunities in the agriculture sector, and they are there. So what perhaps I would like to ask from the panel, and I think we already had this discussion about, your own job creation, so the entrepreneurial skills. So what I would like to ask, and maybe Pumla, I can bring you back to the discussion, is the impact. So in terms of impact, how can we create the biggest possible impact in terms of job security if we're talking about entrepreneurial skills and we're talking about the different sectors? So we keep talking about tech, but there are opportunities in agriculture. There are opportunities in the creative economy, as Damali put it, right? So what type of skills and how can we create the biggest impact to develop these skills so that people can go and start their own company in the creative sector or their own company in the agriculture sector? So Pumla, what's your thought on this?
Yeah, I think this is where we can as well, right? Because when you have perhaps even the resources, if you're so fortunate to have that to start your own company, there still remains some really large scale infrastructural barriers, and that's where a lot of startup costs actually end up going. So even things like high data costs, even for me on the privileged end of the spectrum, the cost of data is just way high, comparatively speaking to my Western counterparts. So I think sort of concurrently to thinking about job creation or making your own job, there's also that other side of the conversation where government needs to be involved in bridging that infrastructural gap that occurs so that young people could go ahead with this. And so, yeah, I think from the skills side, I think we're sort of born with equal skill set on all ends to the degree where, it's hard to say that this is the kind of skill that's needed. I think what is needed more is for, as I said earlier, education to really be reshaped to meet 21st century demands. So things like, even simple technological skills, not that we should all work in tech, but, knowing how to navigate your technical infrastructure to be able to engage in these kinds of conversations is important. And unfortunately, in some rural education settings, that's not the kind of education that they get. I mean, even things like putting yourself out there and branding and, basic things that we take for granted, like LinkedIn etiquette, that is also something that really does matter. Super basic skills at the end of the day that really could be the huge sort of difference maker. I think that's sort of my thoughts on that end.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that covers a lot of those skills there. And Nelson, I mean, your experience is mostly dealing with African talent that is working remotely for Europe. When we talk about the creative sector, when you talk about the opportunities that are there for the creative economy, I think Damali put it very well, or I don't know if we already talked about it, but that's the content that gets consumed within a certain country or within a certain culture tends to be produced locally, right? So it's not so much about consuming content that comes from Europe or from the US. They want to see local content in their own with their own cultural framework, language and everything. So that type of work I assume tends to be more localized, right? There are less opportunities for the remote type of work when we talk about the creative industries, or am I wrong here?
I think it's quite a very interesting question because I would say it is dicey, I would say. It is true that Africa has a huge percentage of youth, such a very youthful population. It is very true. And it is true that the youth love technology. I think the youth are more technology inclined. And I think technology is the future. Mostly because of globalization. We are living in a global economy, and that means we are instantly connected. Digitalization is here to stay, and we either embrace it or we would be left behind. And I really feel like one area where Africa really needs to come up and improve in is understanding that we are in a globalized economy and not in a, not in the old traditional economy whereby Africa is Africa and it's not participating. There's a global economy, which is a global marketplace. Either you're playing in it or you're not playing in it, somebody's playing for you. And that's the understanding that most African countries do not understand. They do not understand the opportunity costs that they are losing by not participating in that global marketplace, because they feel like Africa is on this side and the rest is on that side, whereas there is this global force and global marketplace where they need to participate, because when they're not there participating for themselves and negotiating for themselves, somebody else is defining who they are on that place. And that leads to a huge loss. So with globalization come digitalizations, and I really feel like also one of the main area which can really improve every sector. Speak of agriculture, speak of education, speak of even tech, or let's say human capital development or job creations, which is the main topic that we're speaking about now. The perfect solutions, or a path whereby even the functional economies that we're seeing, or the high-performing economies that we're seeing, that they're also adapting and learning more now, is participatory development, which is why I actually really like this kind of conversation that we're having now, because this is a concept, or this is the definition. This is how participatory conversations start and participatory development are created, bringing different stakeholders who are involved or who are affected. Let's say, for example, we want to improve the quality of education in Africa. The three stakeholders who are really involved in this is the society, the community, which are the people that will go and learn, the policymakers and the education providers, these are the people that teach the program, and the employers, the people that would then employ them. But also within each of the stakeholders, there's also this participatory development and conversation as well, that also the citizen also correspond with other citizens around them and see what they're doing differently, or stay informed about what is the trending thing. Employers as well do not also focus only within themselves or within their city, but also look on the international globalized marketplace and see what other employers are doing, what kind of technology they have. And also policymakers as well, looking also in a globalized central market view, and also see what other people are doing differently. And then they come together and deliberate on the next future to come, and then plan for it. And that's how we can have effective education that will correspond to the current economical need, and not have people trained for what we don't need. And I think until we make this participatory development a conscious thing, because in a lot of developed economy it's happening subconsciously, because in a post-materialistic concept of economy, people become self-organized, because then they already have enough need, and they become more relaxed, and that happens in a self-organized way. But in fact, with Africa, we can jump the step, because maybe we are not yet there where we can be self-organized and have that participatory development, but we can make it a conscious thing and have this kind of conversation, and we'll see beautiful results the same way, and we can jump more steps, in fact, regardless of the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of beautiful framing for where we should be headed. But I wanna bring something that you mentioned there, which is the fact that all the trends seem to point in this one direction, which is a globalized economy, which in fact we already have at the moment. The pandemic also has kind of surfaced a lot of this digitizing and opportunities for these countries. And one of the beautiful things about being here in Estonia, and I was recently in Namibia, is that these smaller countries, the internal market is so small that by nature, they are kind of forced to think a little bit wider when you come up with a new thing. And I think, Patrice is going to agree with me coming from Rwanda. Small countries, very low internal market. You need to start thinking, if not globally, you need to start thinking regionally right away. So when we were talking about the creative economy and we talk about, African content for African audiences, perhaps we should put this in a wider context, which is African content for a global market, and how much of that is happening. How much of the creative industries that are creating opportunities for artists, musicians, movies now with things like Netflix, where you get a global audience from day one. How much content is being made in Africa for global audiences? And you guys are all in different countries. You come from different backgrounds. When was the last time that you remember seeing a movie from a country other than your own coming out of Africa? And this is an open question. I don't know if any.
I really also think that maybe also I hate to blame the government because I have come to a conclusion whereby that we are part of the government and we're also responsible for every decisions and every thing that is going on, and also every possibility that is possible. But I also recognize as well that sometimes the governmental force is also very important in lobbying and especially in branding. I think as it is very important for every company to brand itself the right way, because let's say, for example, I am called Nelson. I built my home brand, and that's why people call me Nelson and see me by the brand I've built. The same way as well that also in national economy also need to do the right kind of branding and lobby, and lobby for a stakeholder, which are the citizens on the international platform. Like what you said, when you look at the African music, I think we're just reading on the article today that some very popular black musician in the US are boycotting the award ceremony. I forgot the name of the award ceremony. They're boycotting, and they don't want to take the Grammy Award because the famous music worldwide are not presented, are not recognized, and most of them are also from Africa. Because look at, for example, in Europe, almost every people around my head listening to Afro music, and they never get this kind of award or recognition. They still stick to the typical framework of the kind of music that even though that the trend is changing. But this is where the government lobbying comes in. This is where branding comes in, which, let's say, the government can do a better job in that way and actually represent its citizens on that international platform.
But I think it's beyond the branding. I think it goes a little bit beyond that, because one of the topics we had for this discussion is also the role of government, right? And I think in setting this framework for entrepreneurship to flourish, in setting the framework for the educational skills to be there, but perhaps also in making sure that certain industries are pushed a little bit more favorably. So when we talk about the creative industries, then clearly there is some role there for government. Damali, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, I did want to say something, actually. And I wanted to look at the role of government is incredibly critical for entrepreneurship, job creation, or whatever it is that has to happen. And it's because, at least in our economies, because of where we are, the government controls a lot. It controls a lot, and therefore it can do so much more to catalyze anything. And if you want anything to be catalyzed on a large scale, on a macro level, it has to be in any of our economies. Government has to take the lead. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they have to be pushed to take the lead, or at least we need to be cognizant of that they have to take the lead. The governments have to create an enabling environment within which entrepreneurship can actually happen. For example, in terms of enabling in the environment, I'm looking at the regulatory frameworks. For example, in Uganda, over the last 2 years during COVID, the government has given out COVID response initiatives. So they're using taxpayers' money to provide funds to SMEs so that they can try to recover from the hits they've taken from COVID. But in doing so, which is a great initiative, but they've channeled it through the banks, through commercial banks. The commercial banks, their minimum requirements is that they need a land title. They need collateral. in form of a land title. As soon as they ask for a land title, all the youth are cut out because most of them don't have land titles. And then also a lot of women don't have land titles because we are patrilineal. It's the men normally who have land titles. So governments can do so much in that framework in enabling that environment. That regulatory framework has to work. And if the government takes the lead and sorts it out, it takes place on a macro level. But then I also wanted to look at how we can catalyze this Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which we just signed. It gives us access to 54 countries. We can trade with each other. At the very moment, we're only intra-Africa trade is just at 16%. It's very low, really, really low compared to, say, Europe, where it's around 65%. And if I look at the numbers, say, for example, for Uganda, Uganda has a trade surplus when we trade with our neighbors. There is a trade surplus, and it's the only place where we have a trade surplus. As soon as we start trading with countries or continents so far away from us, the profit margin is so little that the person exporting that product to, say, Europe, to India, to China, makes a very marginal, nominal profit that there is no point almost. You can still strive if you're incentivized to do so, but it's not a profitable business. But if a Ugandan is selling plastics to South Sudan, the profit margin actually is around 40%. So that's why we have a trade surplus with our neighbors. So we need to do a little bit more to ensure that there is a lot of intra-Africa trade and make sure that that is catalyzed. Again, who is supposed to catalyze that? It's governments. They have to negotiate the tariffs, because the main reason why we don't have a lot of intra-Africa trade is that we charge South Sudan will charge high tariff to Ugandan products, higher than the tariffs they will charge to a Chinese plastic product, which is ridiculous, because then the Chinese plastic products will get in faster.
And I think, Damali, you brought up a lot of points there with your intervention. So I want to unpack some of them, because I think, when we talk about the role of government, of course, government controls a lot of aspects of the economy, and I think it goes beyond just the legislative or the framework that gets set. I think you brought out a lot of points. One point I definitely want to touch upon is this intra-Africa cooperation when it comes to opportunities for entrepreneurs. At least in Europe, there's almost a competition between the different countries about where is the best place to start your business. The Netherlands clearly is a place that positions itself with very favorable laws and tax rates for entrepreneurs to start their businesses. Estonia, the same thing with their e-residency program and making sure that it attracts the talent. I think just yesterday I was reading the stats that I think it was 20% of all. I think it was 20% of all new businesses are created by e-residents. So that's quite a big number. So what's happening in Africa? What's the situation when we talk about entrepreneurship as a way to create job opportunities, entrepreneurship as a way to create your own job, but also to create jobs for others? Are the countries currently competing for this talent in Africa? And if they're not competing, are the governments interested in this competition? Are the governments willing to have this sort of intra-Africa competition about where's the best place to start your own company? Pumla, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I think taking a slight step back, just echoing what Damali was saying about regulations, I think that is honestly the biggest piece to start with, considering that entrepreneurship here is high, right? But around 60% of employment is in the informal sector. And the main reason for that is not because people don't want to be formalized, but it's because there is a huge lack of even simple things like ID, right? And in South Africa, for example, there is a significant economic empowerment fund. However, in order to get the fund, you need to have a bank account. But in order to have a bank account, you need to have your ID. And those are several steps that seem so simple, in different frameworks. But there are some significant, or in fact, so you need to have a tax number. And so some people don't even have bank accounts to have a tax number, right? So that poses a huge challenge if you're a young upcoming entrepreneur who's starting a business, if there's so many barriers. And so then a lot of them end up starting businesses on the side without benefits, without any kind of government protection, because that's what's accessible. So I think, even sort of in thinking of an intra-African approach, that would be something to have, or we need to have all the heads of state together to really discuss how do we shift some of these barriers, because it's no it's no secret that the barriers are high, and especially when you have such significant remote communities as well, where some of these things like banking and the more formalized banking anyway are in urban areas. And so, of course, you have the technical leapfrogging where you have huge presence of mobile banking and insurtech and all of these things. But because they're still seen as private sector and not incorporated into the formal sectors, you could have a lot of mobile money, but that does not necessarily count as collateral officially to position you well for a long-standing business. So I think that would be perhaps a good conversation starter when having all leaders at a table. But I think we do definitely have a long way to go to ensure that that infrastructural backing, that legislative backing exists in order for these upcoming entrepreneurs to thrive.
Yeah, and I think you bring an important point. Patrice, I'm going to give you the word in a second, but I like what Pumla was saying, that, you know, Africa by necessity is a very entrepreneurial continent. You know, people, they need to find something to do, right? So just out of necessity, people have the skills, they have the need, they have the push to do their own thing. Maybe not within the formal economy, but they need to find a way to do something. Patrice, you had your hand raised before. You wanted to add something to the discussion.
Yeah, definitely. As entrepreneurs or people who believe in entrepreneurship, I think that our actions as young people, if we speak to the hearts of young people, or are in that sector as well, we have to push sometimes the action of the government. And with this pandemic, some concepts were naturally proven, such as, let's say, this online payments, mobile money, the need of really digitizing the economy and everything. So most of our African countries were really bureaucratic, still doing everything on paper. But this also, the pandemic has brought some like bad aspects with health, but when it comes to really getting our government to embrace or to see the need of tech-enabled governments, that really was a success. So with that, I will be quick. So we have been seeing changes across Africa. We have some countries that were creating a neighboring environment before. In the case of Rwanda, for example, we had this like ease of doing business, like 6 hours to create your business online in any country where you are. But we have seen some examples that came with the pandemic, such as Benin, for example. So in Benin now, you can start your business online, fully online, by going on a website called monentreprise.bg. You can start your business in 3 hours with all the papers being delivered to you online. So I see that this intra-Africa collaboration, or like enabling entrepreneurs to really act regardless of the country where they are, it's coming. But what's missing at the moment? It's the African youth to take their lead and do their own assignment to search for the information. Because everything relies on information. That's an aspect that we have to think about, because the governments will be pushed to do something. But if there is no information about what's available and what's missing, then there is nothing that will be done. So we have seen more projects that are supporting entrepreneurs, but youth don't know about those projects. And they end up really consuming the money or the time of those projects without really having much impact. Another thing that we have seen in those projects, it's really money being returned to those who gave the money because money was not used. And still there is this gap that young people are not funded or they are not facilitated. Why? Because of that information and like a high level of bureaucracies, if I can say. So Africa has to be fast. So we are one of the slowest continent, like we are the slowest continent when we look at processes and the way we do things. And then information for young people has to really be improved, how information gets to young people. And then when you talk about enabling environment, I will see the role of the government as maybe policies, creating policies, and then the goodwill, because attracting investors or the actors, they are attracted by the incentives. What are the incentives that are there to motivate everyone to act? So we are seeing competitiveness in some countries of Africa. Most of the countries, governments are seeing what to do, what they can do to improve. So there is something that is being done, but it's our turn to search for the information and to act.
I like that. I like that approach, which is very much, the future is in your hands. You need to be the one taking responsibility for it, and not just waiting for others to do something for you. I like that. We're coming to the last section of the panel, and what I'd like us to do now a little bit is just reflect a little bit on the discussion we had here, and let's put ourselves into the shoes of the youth. I'm not calling you old. I think we're all still very young at heart. But let's say that we're just fresh out of school. We're trying to think about our next steps, whether that would be a career somewhere, whether that would be looking for a remote job in Europe or starting my own company. So I'd like you to reflect on what we just discussed and think a little bit about the future. Where are those opportunities going to come from in terms of job security? And what advice do you have, first of all, to the youth of Africa, and then also to the participants at this hackathon who are perhaps taking their first steps in their own entrepreneurial journey? And they're using this sort of event, this hackathon, as a way to test the waters and see, is this whole thing about starting my own business for me, or should I just give up on that and find something else? So kind of let's give some encouraging words to the youth and to the participants of the hackathon, reflecting on the discussion we had here. And Nelson, perhaps let's start with you.
I think there is hope, and that's there's hope. There's hope in the beauty of digitalization, in the beauty of technology, in the beauty of being connected to the whole world in seconds. And this opportunity can just be tapped into by thinking global, by following the trend. It's quite important that we understand that we're not alone, and that we've moved past this point where we are just one small community, but rather we are actually a global community. As long as you think global, and then you think about the global economy demand, and then you teach yourself, or you go for that skills that the global economic demand needs, there's always the opportunity. And also globally, also people's mind are opening to a globalized world. So there is that beauty in that opportunity to the increasing youthfulness of Africa. I think the word of encouragement would just be more that the governmental governance or some rules some of my colleagues have mentioned during this conversation may be made lightened, so that the ease of collaboration between Africa and the global economy will be a lot easier, such as ease of payment transfer, receiving funds in Africa, ease of also, let's say, for example, bringing in new technology that could facilitate or that could help to just make remote work, or that could enhance better communications activities within the country. But I think we're getting there. I think we're moving in the right direction since we're having this conversation now. They are always the starting step to any big realizations, in fact. So I'm really hopeful and excited to also see other Africans as well thinking in this light and having this fruitful conversation. Thanks.
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. The world is your oyster kind of approach. I like that. Damali, what about you? Some thoughts for the youth and the participants of the hackathon?
Yeah, thank you. I think what I would like to partner with for them is to tell them the opportunities are immense on the African continent, and they are still the future of the African continent. They're the majority of the population, and we still have a lot of raw minerals, a lot of raw resources that we can still utilize, add value to. And it's now their job, their mantle to take over, add value to the natural resources we do have as a continent, add value, just use technology to catalyze whatever their ideas are, whatever their business business ventures are, they have to utilize technology to do that. And then also what I would advise them also is that in this entrepreneurship game, it is a long game, so they need to take the long view. Just because you start today and you fail tomorrow doesn't mean you just stop there. You have to continue. You have to be resilient and you have to stay in the game. But most importantly, they have to look at the future as a future full of opportunities because of the amount of natural raw resources that they have access to. They just need to figure out how to exploit them, how to add value, and how to use them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Patrice, what about from your side?
Thank you so much. As young people, my fellow young people, I would tell them, don't wait for someone. We are the ones that we have been waiting for a long time. We see ourselves waiting for government to give us something. We see ourselves waiting for development partners. Then we have our neighbors who are facing a problem. We have the population in our communities. We can find a challenge that we can solve and get money. So that's number one. Number two is that Africa is huge and there are opportunities for young people across. We should get the information as young people and see how we can act and act now. And number three, for these people in universities, young people in Africa, the big percentage are in schools. So don't wait to finish schools to think about your career or the job. So just start thinking about that when you enter the school and prepare that, because we have many of universities having incubators, accelerators. When you are a student, it's when you can have most of the opportunities. Because here in Rwanda, for example, you can even see or meet the president or every ministry when you're a student. But when you get out, it becomes harder to get those people helping you. So young people, please start thinking about your career while you are still in your schools or universities, wherever you are schooling. Start thinking about that and preparing your road out. Where will you be? What will you be doing? Thank you.
I like that. I like that using the time when you are in school in a kind of more safe and secure environment to be take those courageous steps. And I really do think that the people who joined this hackathon are already doing the extra work, because this weekend they could have been out enjoying the nice weekend, but they're putting their efforts into their own future. So that's very nice. Pumla, what about you? Some encouraging words for the youth and the participants of the hackathon?
Sure. I would say that, while a lot of universities now are still in very prescriptive single career pathway mode, the truth is that the future is interdisciplinary, so tap into those other interests that you have, exactly as Patrice is saying, just tap into trying to discover more than just the single career theme or strain that you're on right now. And I say that because we know for a fact that majority of the jobs that will exist in 2030 don't exist yet, right? So that is it's not a sort of daunting thing as it might seem firsthand. It is, in fact, a creative opportunity, right? It is an opportunity that you can get to be a really significant part of actually creating your own whole new path that has never existed before. So I would say just keep tapping into your creativity, keep thinking about linkages between what you're studying now and the need that exists out there and how you can solve it. But yeah, it's an exciting future out there, and I'm really excited to see the kinds of solutions that they come up with now. And if what you're building now doesn't end up sort of being what you think it's going to be, again, as was stated by Damali earlier, play the long game, fail and bounce back up. The point is that you're learning along the way, and you are ultimately still progressing, regardless of how it feels like. So yeah.
I love that. I love the optimism that the panel has towards the future, and I really like this view that the jobs of the future are yet to be created. So whatever you're learning now in school, take it as an opportunity to mix and match, because the skills you're learning now might not be relevant for the jobs that are coming up. And I do myself also have a view that, you know, in the past, perhaps people had the same job for 30 years. Right now, you're constantly reinventing, relearning, and changing path maybe every 3 years. And potentially in the future, it came from 30 years to 3 years. And I think in the future, it's going to be 3 different things at the same time, right? So, so I think this sort of reinvention of skills is very much the name of the game. So I love that we had this panel on job security, looking to the future, looking at the globalized economy we have now and the immensity of opportunities out there for the youth of Africa. So I'd like to thank all of the panelists that joined me here today talking about job security. Thank you so much, guys, for this interesting discussion in the past hour. Today, the next topics we're going to cover in the next panels are very much in line with what we discussed, because we will be talking about financial services and we will be talking about the digital economy. So how the economy is changing in a more digital way. So I think it goes very much in line with what we just had discussed here. So once again, thank you so much to the panelists. And for everyone joining us online, we will have the next panels starting in about 1 hour, where we will be talking about financial services. So with that, I wish all the participants and all the people working at this hackathon, keep working on your projects, and we'll be back in about an hour. Thank you.